Okay, it's about 2 o'clock on Friday, so we'll move forward with our next episode, if you want to call them that, in our Rawls Responds series. I think the previous two have given a little bit of background about why this started, but I did want to take a chance this week to address an issue that's kind of related to this impact of COVID on the economy and focus a little more on jobs. And so as the real estate professor at Rawls, or one of them, I also have the good fortune of keeping up with a lot of our alumni, and particularly some of our younger alumni. And so we've got three guest panelists on with us today. And so I'll just give a little bit of background, and then I'll stop the screen share and let everybody introduce themselves. But first off, we've got Kenneth Barton, who's currently with Stryker. He graduated Rawls with a marketing degree in 2017. And the reason that he's on our real estate panel today is that he's a former industrial broker. And I was familiar with his job hunt experience, and I really think Kenneth went about it the right way, and has got some good advice to share. So Kenneth, want to give us a little bit of background on kind of expanding any of that story, and then also telling us, how are you currently working today? I think everybody's curious to see how all our offices are operating. So jump in and share with us that.
Yeah, sure. So like Professor Harrell said, I'm Kenneth Barton, graduated from the Rawls in 2017 with a marketing degree. Always wanted to be in sales. So I did quite a bit of networking. I tried a couple different jobs. I had an internship with the Goosehead Insurance. I'm sure all the Rawls students are familiar with them. Got a little taste of that selling. Eventually met Professor Harrell, met Dillon, started talking about real estate with them. It really piqued my interest. So, and we'll expand on as the presentation goes on, but, got my job in brokerage right when I graduated in June of 2017. And I just recently jumped ship, and recently is like just over a month ago, to Stryker. So I was in industrial brokerage in Dallas for almost 3 years and got a pretty good taste of it.
And so that onboarding process with Stryker, how's that going? I mean, I think a lot of the students that are watching this may be curious about how the new job process might go. So tell us just a little bit about how that process has gone, especially virtually, and what you had.
Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar, Stryker is a medical device company. They sell, anything from beds in an OR to the big, huge TV screen. I don't know what you call them. I don't work in that division, but like when they operate on somebody and you can see the operation on a big TV screen, they'll go and sell, $50,000 machines for that, all the way down to actual replaceable joints, knees, hips, etc. So I work in the sustainability division, and what that is we take single-use devices, so devices used once and then you would otherwise dispose of. We take them, we collect them, and we reprocess them, and we sell them back to the hospital at a discount. So there's a myriad of benefits, both cost savings as well as environmental impact. So that's what I do with Stryker. The onboarding it's been a little bit of winging it and kind of playing it by ear and just seeing what comes week to week, because the COVID pandemic, things are changing week to week. So normally all my training would have been in person out in Arizona where we're headquartered. But every single thing I've done has been electronic. All of my onboarding calls. I haven't even gotten to go into my accounts yet, because my accounts are hospitals and they're obviously on lockdown, and people like vendor reps, they're going to get cut first unless you're somebody selling a spine device and you need to be in the OR with the surgeon. We're not going to make the short list. So I've been electronic since day one, which was St. Patrick's Day. All of my, like I said, all my training calls, just everything over the phone, everything electronic, Zoom, everything, Microsoft Teams, everything. Done some electronic account introductions, but that's it. Everything's electronic. And I think we're we're kind of discovering new territory of how electronic our jobs can actually be. And for better or for worse, I'll let you decide that, but we're making it happen, desperate times.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. Well, thanks, Kenneth. Thanks for taking time out. I think providing a little bit of unique perspective. Also with us today, we've got Dillon Donald. And so Dillon was the very first, when I started at Texas Tech, Dillon was kind of the student group that I inherited. So known Dillon a long time. He graduated with a finance degree in 2016 and now currently works with JLL, a very large real estate company, as an analyst in debt and equity placement. So Dillon, you want to give us a little bit of, expand on that background a little bit and tell us how a large real estate company like JLL has had you guys operating in the past couple of weeks?
Yeah, so like you said, I graduated in 2016, and upon graduation, started with a firm that was called HFF at the time, and was doing the same thing, debt and equity placement. And then last year we got acquired by JLL, which is a 90,000 person global company. So over the past year, kind of that has been an interesting process to kind of experience. And then, in the past month or so, been working from home, and, basically the entire company's been working from home. And I guess one kind of interesting comment on that is when I was with HFF, we kind of specialized in mortgage banking and brokerage. So transaction volumes are going to slow down a lot. But one of the main benefits of being with a big company like JLL is they have a bunch of different business lines that are going to help, keep paying the bills. So diversified revenue. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic of, we're thankful that, we made the move when we did.
Absolutely. I mean, I think now's the time, like me, I mean, a large organization like Texas Tech has its shortcomings, but there's also times like this, large resources, et cetera, that make you kind of rethink those things. And we'll talk about kind of those firm size differences as well as we go forward. So last, but certainly not least, is Preston Patterson with Clarion Partners. And so Preston graduated with a finance degree in 2017, and he's currently a senior financial analyst in their, or as a part of their asset management team. So Preston, a little more background on yourself and how's it going these days?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Harrell. Happy to be here. So I graduated, like Harrell said, December 2017 from Tech with a finance and economics degree. During my time there, I had a few internships in real estate, one in leasing and one in development back in Dallas. I'm from Plano. When I graduated, I got a job with Clarion Partners, which is an institutional investment management firm.
Not a hotel chain.
Not a hotel chain, very different. We manage quite a few assets across the country and internationally. I work in the Dallas office with the asset management group, overseeing our office investments in Texas, Florida, and Arizona, 15 office buildings across those markets, mainly in the major markets. Let's see, I'm the former president of Rio as well. Really valuable experience in organization. And nowadays it's actually gotten quite busier for me being in the asset management space, dealing with our existing investments and requests coming from tenants and COVID-related issues, whether it be construction or non-essential business shutdown or just the lender approvals and such. So it's been really busy. I've been working from my house for the last 5 weeks, and kind of Clarion as a firm every 2 weeks reevaluates whether to following national guidelines, whether to go back to the office or not. But really, I think it's going to be a slow kind of phased in process for everyone going back to the office. So very busy times.
I know it's been interesting hearing all of you guys and how, everybody's doing a little different. And I think that's one thing that people are still trying to figure out. And especially, me in Lubbock, I know the majority of you guys are in Dallas. and how it's going there as well. Also, I'm excited today because I think as we discuss jobs, we've actually got a pretty good spectrum kind of across property classes, firm size, experience levels. And so all three of these guys will have some stuff to contribute. And so what we want to do today to specifically talk about in this webinar is to, number one, give you an overview of commercial real estate markets, specifically with respect to employment. And we'll talk a little bit about the current environment today, and then how that impacts kind of the employment landscape. Want to give you kind of a definite checklist, overview, things you can do right now to both begin and also increase your job searches. And we really just want to give some practical advice to, number one, college students seeking internships. And so the younger college students who maybe have a couple more years for you enter the job market. If you are a current graduate or about to be graduate in May, as you continue your job search. Also, maybe some people out there that are considering changing jobs, changing careers into commercial real estate. I think this could be helpful. And also, I think from the employer side, kind of the things we talk about, it's always, I think, helpful to get some advice and perspective of people outside of your typical market, et cetera. And so hopefully that we'll have some useful stuff to talk about today. We are continuing this as a virtual RIO meeting. And so for extra credit purposes, this counts as participation in a meeting. We'll do it through the QR code there. And so all three of these former guys were involved in RIO somewhat. So what do you think of our technological changes here in the recent few days?
Yeah, I'm impressed by your tech savviness, Harrell.
Staying with the times.
Yeah,
Awesome.
great.
The only reason we're able to do it is because I keep in touch with former students like Than Tran, who was at Madeira now. He did a lot of the work on the website. And so it's not only important what you can do, but also what people in your network can do as well. So special thanks to him for his help. And so keeping in line with our previous webinars, I kind of like to give you some concrete resource or something to look at. And two things that I've come across in both teaching classes and then kind of advising students on their job searches are, number one, this is a PDF document, this John Crossman Guide to Starting a Career in Commercial Real Estate. He is out of Florida, and so some of the advice is Florida specific, but overall, it's just a really good, probably 20-page read on the commercial real estate job market and entering it. And so highly recommend it because it's free. There's the link to the website. You can get it and download it, print it, and read it there. Also, this is a book that I've introduced into the real estate fundamentals class, I guess over the last probably 2 years. And it's written by Greg Biggs, who is a broker at Dillon's company, JLL. And it is a really good, quick read just to give an overview of the various professions and kind of job opportunities in the real estate industry. And so before we jump in too much, did you guys have any really good materials or things that you looked at or have currently seen recently that are kind of helpful in that perspective?
I haven't read either of the materials that you just shared, Harold, but I wish I would have when I was thinking about looking for a job in the industry. I think exploring kind of the different areas before you get in would be super helpful. And then also, I think real estate sounds great for a lot of people, but a lot of people might not have a good enough perspective of whether or not real estate is right for them. So I think I'd second your recommendation for that book. I think for me, I did a lot of LinkedIn searching and news reading on various companies, and then meeting people and through Rio was huge for me to kind of meet people, see how they operate and run their businesses in order to kind of determine what area of the industry I wanted to pursue.
Yeah, I'd say kind of piggybacking off that as well. Maybe a little bit more unique situation for me as my family, my brother and dad are both in the industry. So I had some frame of reference. They're investment sales brokers focusing on hotels specifically. So really, really pretty niche. As we know, it's a wide industry. So, I'd say through Rio and the meetings and meeting different speakers and going on trips, that really helped me determine which side of the business I wanted to be on. Reading articles online about companies, reaching out, really just networking with different people and picking up the phone and calling someone and asking kind of, what they're doing right now and how they got there. That's sort of how I found out, where I wanted to be in the industry.
I think I gotta say this. I think if you're looking to pursue brokerage, you're probably gonna know you're probably not gonna be between being a broker and being an analyst, just because yes, they are both in real estate, commercial real estate, and residential, but they're so radically different. So I think, if you want to pursue an opportunity in brokerage, yeah, I mean there is good stuff to read. It's just it's typically just general sales books, though, to be honest. I think it's very, very difficult to replicate what you learn by just talking to people, just specifically in the context of getting a job in brokerage. I mean, brokerage is talking to people. So if you can't even talk to other brokers to pick their brain about their job, well, that's probably the first sign that, brokerage may not be an appropriate career choice, which is fine. It requires a very specific kind of person.
Yeah, and I think the earlier you kind of figure those types of things out, like is brokerage right for you? Is it not? Absolutely the better, because then you can go on. So I echo all the things that all three of these guys said. But if you are, looking for an immediate resource and maybe want to read a little bit more, and honestly, our discussion today is kind of going to follow the structure of both of these books. Here are two really good, quick, cheap resources. The PDF is free, and then the Greg Biggs book you can get on Amazon for $10, I think, the e-version. So highly recommend those. So I know everybody, there's a lot of things we could talk about, and we could probably spend just our thoughts on the current real estate market for 2 hours. But to kind of maybe put things in a different light than what you're reading in the news, I got this really good email from the CBRE Industrial Division the other day. It's a couple weeks old now, but it says, look, it's not all bad. And you see some of the numbers here. E-commerce sales up 25%. Hand sanitizer up 800%, home and garden, increasing their presence. And I always think it's interesting to see what happens and what, continues to do well in these periods of economic uncertainty. And so kind of want to give everybody a chance to either comment on, what you're seeing there, it's not all bad, or specifically what you're seeing in, your specific either product category or your experience as well. So Dillon, you want to jump in and give us your take on the fact that it's not all bad?
Yeah. I mean, it's bad, but you're right. It's not all bad. I think obviously none of us, none of the three of the Preston or Kenneth or I went through the financial crisis in 08, 09. But from what I've been hearing through, a lot of the people I work with that did go through that, there are a lot of differences between now and then. And kind of one of the main ones is the fundamentals of our industry and the economy coming into this were really strong. There wasn't any area that people identified as being kind of out of whack or irresponsible. So people feel good about that. Lenders and underwriting assumptions were conservative, and kind of a bunch of different areas that you look at the fundamentals were good. And then from what we're hearing from a lot of our large clients across the country and across the world, back in 08, 09, a lot of companies, or most, if not all companies, were just playing defense, trying to just save themselves and save their companies. But right now, when we're on the phone with real estate companies, they're asking how they can be defensive, but every single one of the groups is also asking how they can be offensive and go on the offense and, find opportunities out there. So that's another good, good sign that people are thinking that way. I talked to another tech grad, one of my mentors recently, who is working for an industrial development team, and they are super well known and have a great reputation and have done a lot in the past. And his comment was they feel like they have the potential to do more business in the next 3 years than they did in the last 10 years combined. With your comment you made about e-commerce and industrial being an area that is, weathering the storm quite well. So
yeah, and that kind of leads into Preston's comment earlier, where he's more, real estate is a transaction industry, and right now this is driving a lot of transactions. It may not be the traditional buy-sell type of transaction, but Preston, you said you're busier right now than you have been in a while, or previously.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I guess from a transactional standpoint, like you guys have touched on, I mean, things have, at least from our perspective, sort of a lot like a lot of other institutional investors have taken a pause right now. Dispositions that were out have maybe been pushed. Our acquisitions guys aren't necessarily looking or have as much capital to place. We do have capital to place, and we are looking at select industrial deals, and some of our smaller kind of value add accounts do have capital. And so we're still looking at deals, but I think the fundamental question right now is, how do you price things in this market when things aren't trading? Things that have really just completely paused. I mean, the credit markets, Dillon can speak to that, are kind of murky and changing day to day on pricing and who has credit available. So that's kind of things that we're running into. But, on the asset management side, I mean, we are still, leases that have to get done. We're working through. I think you've seen a lot of leasing taking a pause just because, people can't even go tour space right now. There's more virtual tours online, but we're still seeing, a few here and there. We've still got buildings that we have to refinance or figure out what to do with, because, we've got loans maturing with no extension options soon. And so, we're working through kind of those things as well. But I do definitely think that, I guess things aren't all bad. I think generally what I've been hearing on a lot of calls is, like we're all saying, industrial is in a good place. It already was in a good place this cycle, and it's poised to do even better potentially coming out of this with these macro trends of e-commerce and potentially like onshoring, supply chain disruptions that we've seen. Maybe users need more space than they used to. So I think things like that can come about. From the retail side, it's obviously it's tough to say, just with non-essential businesses shut down, and do people go back to restaurants with the same density and things like that. How do people use space is kind of a question coming out of this, but those are kind of things.
And a lot of those, it's not all bad, pointed to the industrial sector. And so, Kenneth, I know you're not in the office every day, but you were at least recently. What's kind of, do you think, the pace of activity around industrial right now, or what's going on there?
So I was actually in the middle of answering Blake's question, which I'll answer after your question. So, the pace when I left industrial, it was just breakneck. I couldn't, as a broker, I couldn't tell you how many people I had who were like, "Hey man, I got a bunch of cash. Go find me a warehouse to build or a warehouse to buy." And I'm like, "Dude, get in line." And guess what? You have that massive Wall Street money backed, Prologis or Blackstone. I'm like, you've got those guys to compete with. And they were just at an all out feeding frenzy. So if Wall Street is any indication of the health of the market, then it is just bullish beyond belief.
Yeah, and so, and we'll touch on all the different product types here in a second, because I think that's one of the essential things of understanding as you go into the industry. And so transitioning a little bit from the overall market take to now specifically, looking for jobs in these markets. I think that the immediate first step, out of the box, you need to be able to answer two questions. What do you want to do? either in terms of job function, okay, like how would you describe the job? Is it a broker? Is it an appraiser? Or alternatively, I think if you know a specific property type, multifamily, industrial, et cetera, I think if you can answer one of those two, I think that's close enough to what you want to do. And then equally as important is where do you want to do it? Specifically, what metro area do you want to be looking in? And there's a reason for that as well. Also, I think immediately you need to understand the industry structure, specifically with respect to commercial real estate use types. And we'll touch on that, and kind of these guys will give you their areas of specialty in a little bit. Also, how different job types are compensated between salary and commission, and then also some thought to what size of employer that you want to work for, because their hiring and just general career logic and thought as to if you want to go there differs between a large and a small firm. Third, I think you need to practice the language of real estate, which is often the hardest step just because it takes some time, energy, and effort. And then fourth, develop a search strategy, as in map out how you're going to go about looking for jobs. So the first kind of fundamental concept that really you need to conceptualize when looking for a job in real estate is the idea that it's a segmented market. Okay, so when something is segmented, it means it's broken up into smaller markets, and that's kind of the puzzle piece here, right? Each one is a different submarket. Okay, so in segmented markets, what that means from a very condensed economic perspective is that the same thing might have a different price within the same market segment. Okay, and so we'll see examples of this, like the same thing, an apartment, having a much different rental price in Dallas than it does in New York, right? That's an example or a real life illustration of market segmentation. Okay, and so markets are segmented real estate wise along two lines: their geographic location, specifically where are they at, and secondly, along their use classification. And we'll go into the four uses here in just a second. So the results we see are, like I said before, apartment rents, the same thing, yet different prices in Dallas and New York, or different uses within the same market. Okay, so same market, Lubbock, but the prices of office space is different than an industrial space, right? Same geography, different use. So what I think this means for job seekers is that you have to understand the differences and what it means in terms of pricing between different property types and different locations. And you also need to understand the characteristics for the specific market that you want to enter. And so at this point, I just want to get you guys' thoughts on, you know, not necessarily from a market segmentation theoretical idea, but how important is it to understand the different use types and geographies out there in order to really be taken seriously by an employer?
I'd say it's really important, you know, understanding all of those things and having conversations, one, to try and impress potential employers, but two, so you can have a knowledgeable, kind of educated conversation that gets to a conclusion for yourself. I think one thing on that note to keep in mind for people, Harrell, New York and the people that you would work with in New York would be very different from the people you'll work with in Dallas or Austin or Houston. And even going from Dallas to Austin, like I wear a suit and tie to the office every day, and the guys I work with are super buttoned up, guys and gals that I work with. But the guys and gals in Austin might wear a polo and, you know, sandals to the office, right? So the dynamic of the cultures might be different. So you know, think about that. And then if you're working in the office space, you might be, you know, working with attorneys and lawyers and CEOs. But if you're working in the industrial space, you might be working with a completely different type of person. So kind of feeling that out for yourself as you're looking at different areas is important. So that's what came to mind with that slide.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
I would say if you're going to put it in the context of getting a job, and again, you know, I'll speak to the context of getting a job in brokerage. Yes, it's important to know, like, oh, this is a warehouse. You know, it's probably going to sell for less per square foot than an office building. But as long as you have a very, very basic idea, that that really takes a backseat in brokerage to, hey, is this kid doing all the, the soft things correct? Is he following up with me? Is he being persistent? Is he showing up with his best foot forward? Can he give me his elevator pitch? Can he sell me on why I should hire him? It's in brokerage, it's you have to sell yourself first, and then the brokers will teach you how to sell the product and the product knowledge. So yes, it's important, but if you walked into an interview for a brokerage job and you were just rattling off facts and figures, they're probably going to tell you to go be an analyst. Like, you got to be a sales guy. You got to be a sales guy.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think I'd say, going back to, the 2 slides, that, in an interview, you're going to get asked, why are you interested in brokerage? Why are you interested in the principal side of the business? Why are you interested in the appraisal side of the business? So I think just having these talks, like we're saying, and kind of learning at a high level, what each of the functions are and what you'd be doing in that role and how that suits like kind of your strengths and weaknesses, you can have a better understanding of how to answer that question, because people want to know, why.
Yeah.
And I guess.
Yeah, and I agree. And I'm not saying you need to have facts and figures memorized about office use categories in this specific submarket, et cetera. But I think going into the real estate industry, you need to at least be able to recognize that, look, real estate in Lubbock is different than real estate in Dallas. And the office industry is different than the multifamily industry. And I think starting with that mindset, then it all kind of comes together much quicker and easier from an industry understanding.
Totally agree. And, it depends on the kind of job, I guess, you're getting out of school, but a lot of times you will have to specialize in some, sector of the industry, some asset class. I mean, I only work on office properties. Dillon's a little different on the mortgage side, working on all asset classes. But, I would say, don't shy. If you want to work in industrial, look at industrial companies, talk with industrial people, but I wouldn't shy away with talking with kind of all different types of people in different asset classes, because they're each nuanced. And you're right. I mean, it's sort of fun in my job that I get to see the Texas markets, but also get to see the Florida and the Arizona markets. So I get to see that. You're right. I mean, they're very different. The fundamentals and what drives those markets are different, which is sort of, it's fun to see.
I would second that, Preston. And then one other comment that I would make kind of in that regard, I don't think people should be, when they're looking for a job, I think they need to understand that they don't have to do that forever, because that for me was at one point kind of scary and disabling in my job hunt, to where I'm like, I have to make the right decision because this is my career for the rest of my life. You don't have to, it's important to get into the real estate industry and continue to meet people and learn about the industry from there. So I'd say that don't let that scare you away from a certain role, because you can change jobs, a few years into your career.
Without a doubt. And I think those comments kind of lead into, and particularly what Preston was saying about the different use types. And so we've kind of got 3 different, at least by use types, on our panel today. And so, this is a very simple explanation. The use types are not hard to understand, but I thought maybe each of you guys could give a quick comment on kind of your specialty. And so, Preston, if you had to summarize somebody why the office use type is different than all the others, or about the industry or the job roles, et cetera, what is it about office that is either different or you found appealing, and how you ended up there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So, the assets that I work on range from corporate campuses in the suburbs to multi-tenant kind of mid-rise buildings, on up to, high-rise vertical office towers. And I think, they're all different but similar. I think a trend in the industry is you've seen, Clarion looks at more kind of amenitized office space, and more of I think things have been going like a hospitality type atmosphere. So buildings with a gym in it, or like a tenant lounge, something like that. I mean, that's kind of, we've been seeing some of that stuff. But I'd say, I mean, office is interesting to me just because, there's potentially a lot of tenants in the building. I think from like a financial standpoint and modeling standpoint, it's a little more complicated. You're dealing with, you're getting to see companies' balance sheets that are, professional services firms, which is interesting. I'd say, and there's other things kind of like drew me to it. I mean,
Yeah. And so Kenneth, contrast that, because office and industrial very different. So what was it about industrial that you enjoyed, or what makes it different just from an overall industry perspective?
It's the subtle differences that really make it like. So if you think about the function of an office versus an industrial building, an office and how much a company spends on its office, it's almost like it's almost like a prestige thing for the company. Like a lot of companies, like law firms, for example, they feel like they have to keep up with the Joneses and they have to spend a lot of money on a nice office to have a great appearance. So you could imagine being a broker for a group like that versus I was working with it was a small business. It was owned by a couple with young kids, and they ran a recycling company. They were Chinese, and they exported recycled plastic. And they're like, hey, we need a building with 4,000 amps of power and one that can run drain lines with a given clear height of the ceiling. I mean, those are two radically different sales approaches. So yeah, I mean, nothing is stopping me from representing that law firm and putting them in a building in uptown Dallas. And with my same license, I could go and put that recycling tenant in 100,000 square feet, a building owned by Clarion or Stone Lake or something, or a local owner. We can do it. It's still technically brokerage, but you can see how those subtle differences are in actuality radical differences if you're the broker.
Yeah, for sure. And even to make even things more radically different, let's change from talking about where people run their business to now people's homes and multifamily. And so Dillon, you probably deal with multifamily the most. I know it's not everything you do, but kind of what makes multifamily different from an overall perspective.
Yeah, I've kind of, throughout my 4 years at HFF, now JLL, I've touched kind of all different product types. And like you said, 50+% of the transactions I worked on have been multifamily. And I think that is a super attractive asset class to investors and people that want to work in that asset class, because for the most part, people are more likely to pay their rent before they pay their, office space rent. So having a place to live is important, and home ownership rates, I think, have continued to really decline. So yeah, multifamily is a super popular asset class for investors, and lenders view it very favorably. And, in terms of financing, the agencies probably do $100 billion per year. And that's a huge source of financing on the residential side that, impacts investments.
Completely changing the capital structure. So
Yeah.
again, that use type completely different. And I think just for purposes of time, we don't have to go into retail, but you can obviously see how, let's change it one more time. And now it's not where you go to work or where you produce something or where you live, but now it's where you go to buy something, and the point of sale transaction happens. And so another markedly different use category. And so kind of continuing, just helping people maybe break down the industry and the jobs and the job types. Here's something that I put together, and it is absolutely not scientifically based. Okay. It was kind of based on the two articles I gave you. And I've always kind of explained the real estate industry in terms of a spectrum between analytically focused jobs and then more relational or relationship driven jobs. And the two classic examples at one end of the spectrum, the most relational job is brokerage. the most analytical job is like a market research function. And somewhere in the middle, what I would say a job type that a lot of people are familiar with and also is real estate related is that of a commercial banker. Okay, so some banker making real estate loans working for either a large or a community bank. Okay, that might be somewhere in the middle, kind of part analytical, part relational. And so you guys, and maybe you could just kind of talk about what your job function was. We definitely don't have to hit all the ones on the screen here, but how it kind of fits into to that spectrum that we showed there.
I'll start. So yeah, being a mortgage banker on the right-hand side of that chart, highly relational and solely commission-based. So I have been, or I'm an analyst, and that's kind of where you start in our firm as an analyst, and then you bump up to being the mortgage broker, or what we call a producer.
And an analyst is a really varied term, right? So it's kind of hard to say. If you their job title is an analyst, you don't know exactly what that might mean.
Right. But the guys bringing into the business to our team, they're essentially going out and finding friends that give them business so that we can finance their deals for them. So that's the relational aspect of it. And then for me, like even being an analyst, I'm connecting with the analysts and peers at our clients' firms and with lenders and with other sources of capital. And so highly relational and highly commission-based.
Yeah, and Kenneth, our prototypical broker on the right side, relational, but it's not to say there's not some analytical component to a brokerage job either, right? I mean, I always tell people that the best brokers are the ones that are really good relational and also are pretty good analytical. And the best analysts are, you have both components. And I think Kenneth is a good example of primary relational, but there's some analytical, perspective needed from a brokerage job as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And again, just like life, brokerage is very nuanced. If you work for a boutique firm like I did, you're pounding the streets, you're doing cold calls all day. Whereas if you work for Big Three, CBRE, JLL, Cushwake, and you're an associate broker there, there's probably more analysis involved, less just pounding pavement, making cold calls. You will, but again, I mean, it's determined where you work as well.
Yep.
And yeah, I'd say, I guess my role, I mean, it's pretty highly analytical. I'm at my desk most of the day. It's not to say that it's not relational as well. And I think the further you kind of progress in asset management, the more that you have to lean on those relationships, because we're working with our leasing brokers every day, our property managers, investment sales professionals selling our buildings for us, mortgage bankers who are financing our buildings for us. So you really have to have the skills in the knowledge of these different aspects of the business. Although in my current role, I would say it's more analytical. I mean, as far as compensation, it's a salary-based job. But running a lot of Argus models and Excel models and things like that, and kind of handing over information to my asset manager so you can make these decisions and work with these groups. But I'm fortunate in my position at my company that my boss has pushed me to really make relationships early with these different folks that we're working with inside and outside of the firm, which I think is valuable as you progress in the business.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that relational component is not just client-based, right? It's also, others in the industry. And several of you touched on it. And I just want to point out that this is not a scientific study, but in general, the more analytical jobs, more heavily weighted to the salary, the more relational jobs like broker, more heavily weighted towards a commission. But probably most, if not all of these jobs on this list would have some form of both. They would be salary plus commission, et cetera. Is that your guys' general take as well?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, and I noticed on our time that we're running a little bit long, but rather than speeding up, as long as nobody has any pressing commitments, I say we just go for a reasonable pace and probably try and end up around 3:15, if that's all right with you guys.
That works for me.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Let's talk about firm size a little bit, because I think we've got several different sizes of firms here, and I've got a chart, and I don't necessarily think you have to study it in detail, but Aquila down in Austin did a study based on, the size of the real estate firm, that whether it's regional, national, and kind of how things lined up. And you can see that for Austin, in that upper right-hand corner, that was the large national firms in Austin. So their scope was international, and they had 100 or so people in their office. But you also had really large local firms in Austin too. And so you can see on the top left of that slide, there's 100 plus real estate firms that are still a local firm. And I guess my point here is it's really hard to understand, what type of business employer you're getting into without really taking a hard look and kind of seeing the scope, because you guys have very different experiences based on different office sizes. But would you say that's something relatively important to consider before accepting that job or maybe making a move to a different job?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's very important to kind of recognize the company you're talking to and the size of it. I think that impacts, going back to what maybe Dillon said before, the culture of the firm and potentially, what you'd be doing. I mean, I work in a medium-sized firm, and I think with larger-sized firms too. I mean, sometimes you tend to get siloed into what you're doing, and maybe don't have interaction with different parts of the business just because that's just the way the business operates. Whereas like a firm that Kenneth is at, or smaller firms, you may have to operate with a lot of different hats. I mean, just lots of different tasks and things like that. So I think the culture and kind of flexibility of what you want to do is dependent potentially on the size of the firm.
Yeah.
So
Dillon,
I think something that's really important to remember, especially for new grads, is that yes, it's crucial that you research and you understand what your job will actually entail and the company, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you as a fresh grad, you can only be so marketable having, if you have an internship, great. If you didn't have one, you can still find a job. But at the end of the day, I think that sometimes you just have to take a little bit of a leap of faith and go try it out. And worst thing that happens is you switch jobs and you have that job experience. So yes, again, it's very important to research, but you're only going to be able to find out so much. And there's stuff you're never going to be able to find out until you work on that job.
And I guess, I might have misstated. I'm not advocating going out and doing a ton of research, but just know that different size employers have different roles, and your experience there is going to be different depending on what size they are. And Dillon, you've got a really interesting take on this, because you went from a smaller, yet not that small, HFF to now the world's second largest real estate company. You've seen a spectrum there.
Yeah, well, even before that, in my internships, I had multiple internships with very small companies. One of them in Lubbock being Stellar, and that was a 10 to 15 person office, 20 person company. So the dynamic of that versus even an HFF, 1,000 person company is, very different. You got to think about, do you want to be part of a smaller team and maybe have a bigger impact and, be a bigger part of the team? Or do you want to go learn from a bunch of different people on a larger platform, but maybe be a small fish, in a big pond?
Yeah, and I also think, understanding just the relative sizes of firms in the industry kind of help explain maybe some of their hiring procedures and mechanisms. For example, I've stated on this slide that firm size is relative to hiring timing. And so what I mean by that is your really large national, real estate companies, JLL, CBRE, they probably have a formal application process, internship program, right, with very specific dates. However, a lot of small firms are not going to be nearly that formal. And to be honest with you, they don't really have a specified hiring schedule. And I know all you guys have kind of experienced this, but I always try and remind the graduating seniors out there that it's okay if you don't have a job by May, because that doesn't mean all the opportunities are gone. Don't know if that is compatible with you guys' experience, Preston. I
Yeah,
know it is with
For
yours.
sure.
yeah.
Um,
Or go ahead, Kenneth.
I was just going to say, if you want to talk about job availability for brokerage, I mean, yes, it is influenced by prevailing market conditions. However, there are some unique things in brokerage. At the end of the day, like your firm, they don't take that big of an investment in you, a monetary investment in you. And that's why brokers are 1099. You are eat what you kill, total commission. So yes, you have some desk cost, but your firm, compared to a regular salaried employee, you don't cost the firm that much. So with that being said, a lot of firms, if they like you, they'll make room for you on a brokerage team somewhere. Like my old company, we weren't ever like, oh yeah, we're hiring, we have job openings. It was, we know people, they know us, they want to get into brokerage, they give us a call, and if we like their shtick, then we make a spot for them. And that's how most brokerage jobs are.
And I don't think that's that different than other aspects of the industry as well.
Yeah, I'd say just touching on that larger companies do have more structured processes, and maybe they're putting out applications at certain times of the year. But I would say that, like you're saying, most real estate companies don't take classes of analysts or classes of people at a specified time. Maybe like Crow Holdings in Dallas kind of takes a class of analysts, but most of them are one-off hirings, just because there's a lot of smaller to medium-sized companies out there, and it's just kind of dependent on the need at that time, project availability, and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to just constantly talk with different folks. It's kind of almost like a sort of a numbers game. I mean, just because, and a lot of these just aren't posted online. I mean, you have to talk to these people, and kind of positions are potentially made. So,
yeah, our firm the statement they always make is we're always open to looking at talent. So while it might be more structured, they're still open, kind of how you guys said, just open to looking for talent.
Yeah, and it seems like every April around this time, I'm not seeing students as much, but I have people that are still looking for jobs and they're getting panicked. And I think that's a comforting thought to know that, there is really no certain timeline, because every company, varying by size, is going to have their own kind of search availability. And so one of the things I know that students run into a lot when they're out maybe interviewing for the first time, or beginning to look at real estate jobs, is I hear feedback that they just talk a different language. And I also see that in my classes, because I know some of the more difficult concepts are just adjusting to the language. But there is a reason why real estate language is kind of hard to pick up, or at first, is because it's a specific type of asset, right? It's not generalized, it's very specific. And you layer on top of that industry terminology, kind of shorthand stuff. They'll use ratios, et cetera, to express certain concepts. And so I think the industry is viewed as having almost like this foreign language that's impossible to pick up. And I don't think that's the truth. But the reason it's hard is because in order to learn it, you just got to jump in and engage it. And here's a book, another one that I would highly recommend. It's got a great glossary up front about some industry terminology. Also think reading news articles, podcasts, and just discussion with other people, whether they be in the industry or fellow classmates, getting involved in the Rio events and figuring out what's going on is the only way that you can really pick that up. So don't know if you guys recall back a couple of years ago when things like a cap rate were not exactly the clearest thing to you, and kind of how that you either improved it or how you picked it up.
I mean, when I first wanted to get into real estate, I didn't even know that there were two brokers involved in the transaction, the listing broker and the tenant rep broker. But I mean, just like anything, I mean, we all started out at zero, so it's okay. I mean, that's why you're in school. And kind of like I said earlier, a lot of brokerage firms, they don't fully expect you to know or to be a walking encyclopedia. But my advice, and it's advice for a lot of things in getting a job in commercial real estate, is talk to as many people as you can, and don't be afraid to ask them questions that you might think that they think are dumb. They're happy to help. They know that they recognize that you're a student or soon to graduate. They realize that. So ask them.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kenny. Even starting at HFF, when people started at our firm, when they come in, they're scared to ask questions, and people always say, in your first 6 months, there are no dumb questions. So ask as many as you can. Harrell, I agree to the points you made. Reading news articles, podcasts, hearing people talk about commercial real estate was really helpful for me. And then writing down questions I had and then going and looking them up on Investopedia or asking people about it. And then like webinars, kind of similar to podcasts, are really good. I would always go on LinkedIn and just read about various companies. And one function that I liked was if I'm reading about JLL or HFF, at the bottom of the page, it would list like 5 similar companies.
Mm-hmm.
So I would then go read about them and look at their size and their footprint and things like that. So there are a few things I did.
Yeah, I'd say some important areas where I kind of learned before I got into the actual business was through Rio, like I mentioned earlier, sitting on those speaker classes and going on those trips and just kind of trying to take everything in that I could about what they're saying. I think internships are a really valuable way to gain knowledge and to make connections in the business. I'd suggest everyone listening, if you're still in school, try to go out and pursue an internship. I had, I guess, 2 structured formal internships, and I think they're really valuable because you're getting to learn about that area of the business. And I would always, like Dillon said, just write down a bunch of questions that I had throughout the day, and go to whoever I was working with at the end of the day and just kind of get them answered. So I think kind of the real world practical knowledge is gained through kind of those 2 avenues along with.
It's just, it sounds very easy to say from afar, of just saying it's one of those things you have to do it to learn it. And I don't think you don't have to necessarily do it, but you have to engage it in some way in order to pick it up. And so along with learning the terminology, and I think all of this kind of builds to this about searching for jobs, because these things like market segmentation, use types, pay scale, relational versus analytical kind of come into play into how people should approach jobs. And I just wanted to run through a couple of like search strategies and maybe why they don't fit the real estate industry well. And so one would be online databases, right? Just sitting at home and submitting resumes randomly and searching real estate jobs. Okay, a lot of real estate companies don't have them in these large national databases because they're not looking to fill a specific role, right? They're just looking to hire some talented individuals. And so it's not a specific job that you'll see posted. Another strategy, particularly for college students, is job fairs. I highly recommend them. But for real estate, you typically don't see a whole lot of real estate companies at job fairs because a lot of them don't have a dedicated recruiter. Remember, this is an industry with a lot of smaller firms. And so they don't have a dedicated recruiter to go visit that job fair. Some do, and we're appreciative of it, but a lot don't. Also, another strategy sometimes people employ is just to send out an unsolicited resume, either by mail or email. You don't know the person, you haven't contacted the person, but you just send them a copy of your resume. Almost all jobs in real estate involve some relational component. And so this strategy doesn't fit the industry well because that's not the type of people that are in the industry. And so I think all of these guys will tell you that the best strategy is number 4, this concept of personal networking, which is your focus is on connections, not jobs. And I always recommend the students, when you reach out to somebody, this strategy, it's very simple. Tell them you're looking for advice and ask them if they can introduce you to somebody else. The beauty is you never have to ask them for a job. But guess what? If one of these people that you run into happens to be looking for a job, they're going to let you know it. And so this is really the area where I think these 3 guys excelled. And if you guys just wanted to touch on why some of those work, some of them don't, and kind of your own path, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I'd say for that last one, Harrell, the networking and forming relationships, you got to be persistent. So you might not have a relationship in real estate that you can kind of start that process with, but if you be persistent and eventually get on the phone with that person and ask them about their role and their job, eventually a relationship will form. So for me, like you said, I was getting to know a lot of people through just having, curious conversations, and relationships grew that way over time for me. But you got to be persistent. They're probably not going to respond to your first 3 emails. So you got to call them, keep following up.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that. My process was just like all these guys, taking people out for coffees, calling people, sometimes cold calling people that I didn't know personally, but I was interested in what they were doing and I wanted to learn about it. I definitely say, don't go in asking for a job and that's why you're setting up a meeting. Go in because you want to genuinely learn about what they're doing, learn how they got there, learn about them as a person and build a relationship. And if there is an opportunity, they will let you know, like you said. I do think, asking people to maybe, if you have at the end of your conversation, to give you a few names of other people in the industry that they think might be valuable for you to talk to. It's a good way to kind of snowball and gain momentum in your network. And people are generally happy to provide you with other contacts and really happy to talk with you. Even the guys that you cold call. People like when you're reaching out to them. You'd have to be persistent, but people like that you're hungry. And I think that's the motivation is a lot of what people are looking for in this industry, because it's especially in brokerage and things like that. You're going to get a lot of no's, but you kind of have to be self-sufficient and move forward that way. So really networking for me, I think, was the most important avenue into getting my job. Yeah.
And it's same as Dillon and Preston said, it's networking. And the reason why I love Rio so much is that the industry trips, I think they get what I think is the hardest part of networking out of the way, is just getting the initial list of contacts. So I remember Rio, Dallas, my first Rio trip to Dallas. I had a spreadsheet of all the people that we talked to. I sent every single one an email, or I called them. And just like Preston said, I said, hey, just want 5 minutes of your time. So literally, that simple of a question snowballed into, I had an internship with a local brokerage shop here in Lubbock. I had a brokerage job when I graduated, just from connections I made through Rio. And then once Rio makes those initial connections for you, which again is the hardest part, then like Preston said, you can go up to every one of those guys. Hey, you got any buddies, you think that you learn from, guys just like yourself, I'm looking just to sponge up information. And if you do that, those guys know why you're talking to them. You'll find the job opportunity. And that is especially prevalent in brokerage.
And one more note on that. I've interviewed people that come in with a list of everyone they've networked with in the industry, and they connect the dots, almost like a web of their kind of relationships and contacts. And I think that's personally pretty interesting, or pretty impressive. Something to, show that you are out there meeting people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and if you kind of know their network and you have that additional bond of, hey, this person, I know.
Maybe
this
drop
person.
a few names.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
It's
and I will say,
evil.
I will say one more note on that just just submitting your resume online and never speaking with someone at the
waste
firm,
of time.
It's somewhat a waste of time in this industry. Generally the people that are walking out the door talking with people that are hiring is, someone that's already had a connection, or already, someone vouched for them, or you've talked to someone at that firm. So I think it's really important to, you can send in those resumes, but you need to talk with someone at the business, or else really.
And I completely agree. And I know some people have frustrations of saying, well, real estate's it's like a good old boys club. You have to know somebody to get in. And yeah, but I think if you understand the industry a little bit more and these issues we've been talking about, I think it kind of makes a little bit more sense, and helps you kind of break it down and navigate that industry a little bit better. And so these last two slides are just a couple of things that I think can improve your chances. And I know they can, because I've seen a lot of students use them. I don't think we'll touch on internships too much. My point here was paid or unpaid, it really doesn't matter. It's helping you build that network and build that experience and that conversation ability. If you take one thing away from this, if you're a current student, it's that my opinion is the industry is moving more towards certifications and trainings. They want to see what you can do, okay? And it's not necessarily that they want the skills from that. It's the signal that it sends that, hey, I was diligent, I took my own time, I explored this, I did this to prove to you that I'm serious about getting a job in this industry. And so they're just an excellent way to signal your interest. There's a lot of possibilities out there. A lot of them are relatively inexpensive. I know some of these guys took advantage of them, but to be honest with you, I didn't push them near as much when you guys were in school, and we've learned a lot in the last couple of years. Preston, I know you were a big proponent of getting us to start doing the Argus training here, and Dillon has given a lot of good ideas. So didn't know from sitting in your seat as you see students coming in and applying, what do you think when you see the ones that have gone the additional mile to get some type of additional certification?
Yeah, I think it's really valuable. I mean, I think like Kenneth alluded to earlier, employers aren't expecting you to know everything about your job position before you come in, especially coming out of an undergraduate program. But I think how you differentiate yourself, because it is a competitive industry, is by getting some of these certifications. In my case, as an asset manager, and really in Dillon's case too, I mean, the way the institutional world talks to each other is through Argus, through these cash flow models, and it's done through this Argus software. So if you can say that you've at least got certified, or you know what it is, you can work in it. They're not expecting you day one to come in and run this Argus model with a specific case, because you're not going to really learn that until you're on the job. But if you know what the platform is and know how to kind of sort of speak the language, then I think that's a big positive for you compared to other people that haven't done that.
Yeah, one of the things I've always said is, one of my goals is just you're 2 weeks ahead, right? You're 2 weeks ahead of the person who's hired alongside you. Well, think of everything you learn in the first 2 weeks on the job, right? And if you can continually be 2 weeks ahead, in 5 years, I mean, the difference is exponential. So it's not about being able to run an Argus model the first day on the job. It's about you've taken the initiative, you know a little bit more of the lingo, you know how it works, right? You may still have to sit through another class, but you're going to be that much better than everybody else at doing it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
No doubt. Same thing applies with Excel. Those two things, I think, are, at least for my role and Preston's role, pretty important.
Yeah, and Kenneth, I want to get your thoughts on the next one. And so here are some recommended trainings. These are the web links to them. I think they would all be good. A very related concept is certification or licensure as a real estate salesperson, either in Texas or whatever state. And so understand that in the commercial industry, a license is not a prerequisite, okay? It may be for residential, and it may be you may need to acquire it eventually in some jobs like a broker, but it's a really good way, just like a certification in Argus or Excel or whatever. It's a really good way to signal to employers that I've taken care of business, I'm ready to go, and I know some, kind of basic background that might be relevant to the job. Kenneth, didn't know your thoughts specifically from a brokerage perspective about licensure before you get the job.
Yeah, I mean, it's the real estate license test. I mean, if you're graduating any college in 2020, 2021, I mean, you're going to be able to sneeze and pass it. So it's, I mean, like you said, it's a sign of commitment to the job. Again, like you said, you're taking care of business, you're ahead of the curve. So it's why not? No, it's not required, but sure is a nice card to have in your pocket.
Yeah, and like, for example, Preston or Dillon, neither of you have your license, right? And you don't need it to do your job, but you could have done it beforehand, and probably your employer would have said, hey, that's a good thing.
Yeah. I don't need it, but it's just another, something positive to put on your resume.
Yeah. And finally, I think this is one of the best resources anybody in the market can utilize are industry organizations. And there are a lot of real estate industry organizations out there. Several of the larger ones have options for students and young professionals, such as ICSC, NAIOP, Cornet, ULI. All of these, with their membership, have some form of job board. Usually the membership is discounted or free for students. And so I just can't emphasize enough as this being kind of a launching point for exploring some of these things we've talked about even further, because they're going to have their own education, et cetera. And so didn't know if you guys wanted to have any concluding thoughts on just industry organizations, and then before we wrap up.
Yeah, like I told you, Harrell, I've been getting involved in ULI, and it's a great way to learn about maybe areas of the industry that I'm not familiar with, but also meet people and build new relationships. Here locally, I go to events all the time with Preston and Kenneth. Trek, the Real Estate Council, is really good for see Ryan in the background, Preston, for meeting people, and it's really very active among peers in the industry. So there are a lot of good resources, and that was one of my comments earlier. Like, if you don't know exactly what you're going to be doing, if you don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life, get in the industry and start meeting people that way, because there are a lot of resources through those organizations.
Yeah, Preston, didn't know if are you involved in any of the organizations through work, or do you see the benefit from a student perspective?
Yeah, so like Dillon mentioned, I'm in Trek, the Real Estate Council here in Dallas. I think it's a great way to network with people that maybe you wouldn't interact with on a day-to-day. I think just overarching theme, you may not see the value of those relationships with people that you're not directly working with on a day-to-day today, but there is value in those relationships. So I think another point to take away from this is, as you're networking to get a job, this came to me, keep your network. I mean, keep your network up, reach back out to those people, even after you have a job, thank them and keep it going. Just because I think it's a long-term game, it's relationship business, and you're really those relationships will pay dividends. So I do think the organizations are great. ULI I've looked at, ICSC, case competitions in school are great.
And I think one of the biggest benefits is for people that are saying, well, I don't have many contacts in the real estate industry. Well, what a better place to start than, a industry organization whose sole purpose is to facilitate those types of relationships. And so I think that's why they're so valuable to young professionals, but also potentially to students if you wanted to take advantage while you're still in school.
Yeah, totally agree.
For sure.
Kenneth, didn't know, we were just talking industry organizations. I know you're kind of on the way out of the real estate industry, but
sorry, I spilled a beverage I had to take care of.
I figured it'd be zero gravity there. So
yeah, we're Hal is giving me drinks. Industry organizations, just like what these guys said, in brokerage, I was focused on talking to tenants and owners, so I didn't really procure business from the broker organizations, but it was good to be present. I did get invited to a Trek event when I was an undergrad, just again by networking. It was the name of a guy that I got from a contact that I made through Rio, and I got to go to a broker only networking event. And I mean, if I was going to my final job interview the next day, but if I didn't have any more prospects, I hit the honey hole for networking because I was surrounded by all brokers and no students. So, you can get in these organizations and it could be pretty fruitful for sure if you're looking to get into something like brokerage.
Awesome. Well, we've gone a little over our time. Hopefully nobody out there will mind too much. But we will have probably a couple more of these webinars. These are the 3 that we've had previously. The first 2 on the congressional changes under the CARES Act, and then today about the real estate industry. We'll record all of them. We'll put them on the Rio's YouTube channel, and we've also got a Rawls response page on the Rio website now. So Kenneth, Preston, Dillon, thanks for your time and sharing your thoughts with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here. All right. See you guys later.
Okay.
ya.
Take